Revolutionary greetings. Haki Kweli Shakur, Cedar Gabriel Prosser, the Cedar Ann Woods, coming back at you again, man. Decided to go ahead and get into my next topic that I wanted to touch on. And first, let me give a shout out to my ancestors, my blood ancestors, known and unknown. Shout out to August 3rd Collective South for the New African Independence Movement. Shout out to all the cosmic energies and forces of the universe that's walking with New African people daily for liberation and freedom. Netaru, Rishas, Bosun, Liwas, rise with us, man. This video I decided, to continue on with the, history on where I come from, which is Virginia. The land of the rebellious, the land of the rebellion, the land of the revolt, the land of the New African freedom fighters, man, who first put it down. And this video is about some great people, who wanted freedom, and they did everything at all costs and by any means necessary to get free, man. And this video is about the Maroons of Virginia, the Dismal Swamp Maroons of Virginia / North Carolina, because these Maroons, they ran away and they ran into like this place here in Virginia called the Great Dismal Swamp, and it's like on the southeastern, part of the state, but it runs down into the northeastern part of North Carolina also. So it was Maroon communities set up all across that area, and never really heard nobody really discuss it too much, so I decided to go ahead and drop a video about the Maroons of Virginia that many people don't really know about. And second part of the video is going to be just a little brief touch on revolutionary womanhood, and I decided to talk about another combatant who put it down here in Virginia by the name of Ann Wood. And she was a New African woman, black woman, who escaped slavery from Loudon, Virginia. And I'm gonna give a brief little touch up on that. I'm gonna touch on that a little bit in the second part of the video, because this video not gonna be that long, because I'm gonna run through this real fast, because y'all know my videos be overlapped, and because I like to talk a lot, so I be trying to get as much information across as possible, so sometimes my videos be overlapping in time, but I'm going to try to start making my videos in 2015 shorter and shorter, man. So let me just go ahead and hop into the Great Dismal Swamp Maroons. First, let's talk about the word maroon, because I know a lot of people know the word maroon terminology, originated with the Maroons of Jamaica and the Maroons of Haiti. So these are your first Maroons. This is where the term comes from. So it's a little discrepancy on what the term originated from, or who originated the term. Some people say it started with the Spanish. It's a Spanish term. Some people say it comes from the Arawaks. Some say it comes from the Tainos. You know what I mean? So it's really, conclusive evidence on where the word originated from. So we're just going to go ahead and say, it comes from, Haiti and Jamaica. This is where the term originated. This is what they started calling these people who ran away from their slave masters to get away from the cruelty of slavery. And, they, wherever they were in whatever parts of Haiti or Jamaica, they ran up into the wilderness part of that country, and lived back into their indigenous, inhabitants, of the ancestors, living in the wilderness, living in the woods, living in mountainous areas, that's indigenous, term, way of life, when you living out there in the wilderness and you living in your natural state of being. You see what I'm saying? So that's what, a maroon is. The term maroon itself is really, the meaning of that is kind of up in the air also, because some people say it means fugitive, some say it means runaway, some say it means just a wild person. You see what I'm saying? So it's all on, what you take from the term. So, it's I'm gonna basically say it's all of those definitions in some way or the other. You know what I mean? So it's like fugitive. Well, I don't really like to use the fugitive word too much because I feel like, you know, our ancestors when they was trying to liberate themselves from slavery, how could you be a fugitive when you're trying to get away from the criminal? You see what I'm saying? Because slavery was a criminal act. So I don't like to call slaves fugitives, but you're going to hear me mention those words in this video because that's what, you know, the colonialists labeled our ancestors who tried to get away from the terrorist, you know, system of slavery and their terrorism and their tyrannical, dehumanizing acts of terrorism on our ancestors. So I don't call them fugitives, but this is what they call them, you know. So let me move right on into it, man. The dismal swamps of Virginia, man, the land of the rebellion. I'm trying to tell you, man, we was putting it down here, man. So let me get on right into it. You know, the Dismal Swamp Maroons. Who were they? They were freed and escaped slaves who inhabited the marshlands of the Dismal Swamp in Virginia and North Carolina between the era of 1700 to the 1860s. This is this is the people who, you know, they either bought themselves out of freedom or they escaped from freedom, and by any means of getting away from these colonial slave masters, they did that, man. And so they ran into this marshy land here in Virginia, forestry land here in Virginia, island-like type land in Virginia, and, you know, set up communities, man. You know what I'm saying? This is self-determination right here, what I'm explaining to you right now. You know, independence. Our people have always tried to get away from the imperialist European colonialists, man, to gain independence, man, and to live in a free society, to control their own destiny, you know, and to be self-determined people. You know what I mean? So your swamp maroons and your maroons were some of the first people who did that. So where was the swamp located? The Dismal Swamp was located between the southeast Virginia and the northeast North Carolina between the James River. Here go the James River again. Story James River. Near Norfolk, Virginia, and Albemarle County Sound near Edison, North Carolina. This place stretches from over 1 million acres of land at first, but today, from, you know, all this human development and human cutting down trees and destroying lands, putting up buildings and all that type of stuff, this land area, this area where the Great Dismal Swamp has been destroyed, and today, well, it was destroyed 90%. So today, just imagine how many acres that's left. You know what I mean? So that's just the little summary of where the land is and how big the land was. It was over 1 million acres, and it was in southeastern Virginia from Norfolk, stretched all the way to northeastern North Carolina and to Edison, North Carolina, northeastern, you know, North Carolina. Moving right along. The reason why most of this land was destroyed was due to slave labor that was used in effect. Well, it was used in effect, and its efforts was to drain and log the Great Dismal Swamp during the 18th and 19th century. Escaped slaves living in freedom came to be known as the Maroons or the Outliers. This is the other name that was called for these people who ran away from their slave masters, called outliers. I really don't know really too much of the definition of why they call them outliers, but basically I'm thinking they're saying they were outlaws. You see what I'm saying? They were outcasts, you know what I mean? And they just was straight out people who just didn't abide by, you know, the slave master rules, which I can dig that. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm guessing what outliers means, you know what I mean? So let me move right along. Maroonage. Maroonish runaway slaves in a isolated or hidden settlements existed in all southern states at one point. This was your deeper south. So Maroons was always here. They was all across the deep south, man. No matter what state it was, from Louisiana, some parts of Texas, basically the Black Belt, you know, or what we call today, that's inside, you know, the Republic of New Africa, the whole deeper south, all the way into the upper south. Maroons settlements were all over these areas, man, because this is where slavery was at. You know what I mean? This is slavery, you know what I mean? So you know about the southern states. So The swamp-based Maroon communities existed in the Deep South. The Maroonage people in the Upper South were largely limited to Virginia and the Great Dismal Swamp. So this is where the great percentage of the Upper South Maroons, settlements existed at. Virginia, you know what I mean? So a lot of people probably never even really, understood that we had Maroons here, Maroons was, mainly, like I said before, when we hear Maroons, we think of Jamaica and Haiti. But no, they were here in the Deeper South and the Upper South. Moving right along. At the beginning of the 18th century, the Maroons moved into the Dismal Swamp, settling on a Messick Island. The Messick Island was like a high, dry parts of the swamp. So it's just the main land that's higher than the lower part of the marshy land of the swamp, man. Because the swamps are surrounded by water. It's a watery area, swampy. So they settled into the Messick Islands. That's within the Great Dismal Swamp, which is the highlands. There were slaves who were purchased. There were slaves who purchased their freedom, and there were escaped slaves who escaped and used the swamp as a route, also for the Underground Railroad route. So, a lot of the slaves used the Great Dismal Swamp as a strategic area and a route to take, so they won't get caught by the slave catchers. They took this route up northern eastern North Carolina, Editon. They'll take that route all the way up into southern Virginia, up into Norfolk. And this was like part of the main part of the Underground Railroad route. This is how so many slaves got free when Harriet Tubman was coming down south and freeing slaves, and they was taking this Great Dismal Swamp route. So, yeah, a lot of these Great Dismal Swamp Maroons used this Great Dismal Swamp to get further up north to get freedom, man. So that's another information that many people probably don't know about the Great Dismal Swamp. It was also part of the Underground Railroad. Some more information. Let me move right along. Nearby whites left enslaved Maroons alone as long as they paid a quota in logs and shingles. Businesses may have ignored the fugitive nature of escaped slaves who provided work in exchange for trade and goods. So basically the Maroons, and certain slaves, were doing business with whites outside of the Maroon Great Dismal Swamp in exchange for goods. You see what I'm saying? So this would keep them whites from coming into the Great Dismal Swamp and messing with them. You see what I'm saying? So they can keep being independent and stay free out of slavery. Because, the Europeans at the time, they wouldn't go into this swamp. You know what I'm saying? Because it was too, how can I say, it was too, like, marshy. You know how whites was living back then. They think they was superior, man. They was thinking they better than black people. So they wasn't going to go into the area. So it was dirty and all that. And swampy, so they wasn't going to go into the Dismal Swamp messing with these people, basically, man. So, but they also was trying to bribe the Maroons, you know what I'm saying? Trying to, make them pay quotas to stay free. So either way we go, we was just getting exploited and extorted. Even when we was free, even when we got away from these Europeans, man, they still was trying to extort the people. You know what I mean? So, yeah, some of these Maroons paid quotas to keep their freedom. Just like some of the free slaves kept paying, get exploited out of money to stay free. So it wasn't nothing new to see, people, Maroons or escaped slaves, still being exploited throughout this time period also, man. It was stated that 2,000 blacks, so-called fugitives, and their descendants lived in the swamp trading with white folk. The political economy of the exile in the Great Dismal Swamp said thousands of people lived there between 1630 and 1865. Also living there were indigenous natives, Maroons, and slave laborers. It was one of the largest Maroon colonies in the United States in that period. So this was the largest Maroon settlement in the United States of America right here in Virginia, man. The Great Dismal Swamp. And the Great Dismal, Maroons was putting it down, man. Also, fear, because at this time, like I said, it was Virginia was putting it down on this revolt tip and this rebellion tip, man. Matter of fact, all through the South was putting it down, where slaves were, showing stiff resistance and revolting and rebelling to get free. So the Europeans at the time here in Virginia were fear of a slave unrest, and fugitives were living. They were so fearful because they knew that slave unrest was taking place, and there were fugitives, slaves living amongst the Maroon population. Caused great concern to the whites. So a militia with dogs went into the swamp in 1823 to remove the Maroons and destroy their community and burn down their community and capture Maroons and to bring them back into slavery. But in 1823, when this took place, when the militia came into the Great Dismal Swamp, the greater percentage of the Maroons have already escaped and got away. Most of their stuff got destroyed, but they got away. They didn't get captured. You see what I'm saying? Only a few probably got captured. But this goes again to show you how Europeans fear black people who are independent, living on their own, and minding their own business, and prospering. Because the Maroons didn't need them, you know what I'm saying? Because they was making trade, they was getting their resources and all that thing with the whites who did cooperate, and they was building up this Maroon area in the Great Dismal Swamp. They was building up their communities all through the swamp, so they didn't need Europeans. Here you go, jealous Europeans hating on blacks who are independent, controlling their own destiny. They send the militia in and try to destroy the Maroons and recapture them. But it was a good thing that the Maroons got away. You know what I mean? So, and due to this, in 1847, between 1843 and 1847, North Carolina passed a law that was aimed at capturing the Maroons in the swamp. Unlike most Maroon communities, they were destroyed and then captured by the militia. Thus, in the Great Dismal Swamp, avoided capture and the discovering of their homes. So, during this period when they passed that first bill and that first law, North Carolina, when they was capturing Maroons, they was capturing a few, but like I said again, the majority of them escaped and got away. And yeah, they ran up into North Carolina and Virginia and was destroying most of their, communities in the Great Dismal Swamp. But the majority of how they built their houses and how they built their little huts and things in the Maroon Dismal Swamp, these things were camouflaged and hidden, so they didn't discover most of the Maroons' homes when they came in there and tried to arrest them and destroy their community. You know how our people are, man. Our people are intelligent in warfare, man. So you need to take up lessons on that, man. And like I said before, the Great Dismal Swamp was also the home to the indigenous natives who were already living there. Some say the indigenous natives were living in the swamp for like over 5,000 years ago and was there before the Maroons came in and settled there. So when the Maroons came in and settled there, they were living there with the indigenous natives too also. And the indigenous natives were also helping them, ward off and fight off the invading militias from keeping them getting captured and be re-enslaved. Some of these indigenous natives were captured and were recertified and put into slavery. Not a great deal of them because they fought off most of the militias at this time period, man. So, our people were, defending their territory and defending their freedom at all costs, man. That's why, a lot of people, that's why we, respect and pay homage to the Maroons at all costs, man, because these were some fighting people. They always fought. They always resisted. You know what I mean? During slavery. Some Maroons were born to escape slaves and lived in the swamp their entire lives, despite the hardships of the swamp life. Dense underbrush, insects, poisonous snakes and bears were living in these conditions. The difficult conditions also made the swamp an ideal hiding place for escaped slaves, not just for escaped slaves, but also for free black slaves who worked on the swamp's canals and Native Americans and outcast whites such as criminals. So this showing you that this place was, also having all types of ethnic groups running here for their freedom, man, and to be liberated from the oppressors. You know what I mean? This is basically a community of oppressed people who got away to seek their own freedom and independence. Maroons were known to have often interacted with slaves and poor whites to obtain work, food, clothes, and money. Some fugitive slaves plundered nearby farms, plantations, stole from anchored boats, and robbed travelers on nearby roads. Those caught were tried for murder, theft. Some Maroon communities were set up near the Dismal Swamp, built between 1793 and 1805, and are still in operation. These Maroons interacted more with the outside world than those who lived in the swamp's interior and had more contact with outsiders. Once the canal construction began, some took jobs on the canal, and with increased contact with the outside world, some people living in the swamp eventually moved away. During the American Civil War, the United States colored troops entered the swamp to liberate people there, many of whom then joined the Union Army. Most of the Maroons who remained there in the swamp left after the Civil War. So that's just basically a rundown on the Great Dismal Swamp Maroons, man. You know, they lived in the Great Dismal Swamp. See, the Union Army, when they came in there, they tried to come in there and try to say that these wasn't good living conditions for the blacks and Maroons who live there. So they came in there and persuaded some of the Maroons to come back with them so they can live better. And like the United States Army and the Union people, like they always do, who did they always run to for help when they want somebody to fight their wars? Black people. So some of these Maroons got persuaded, to join the Union Army and to help fight the Union to gain greater freedom. So that's basically what that was. But throughout all these years, these Maroons were fighting against militias who were trying to re-enslave them. So it was a revolt, rebellious resistance at all times in Virginia and the border of North Carolina, man, against the militia, United States, USG, United States Government Army, man. Moving right on along into my second part of the video, before I shut this video down, the revolutionary woman of them all, Miss Ann Woods, Miss Virginia, a bold stroke for freedom, man. This is why y'all hear me sometimes say, I'm the seed of Gabriel Prosser and the seed of Ann Wood. That's a revolutionary marriage. You see what I'm saying? Because these are, heroes of Virginia that I'm taking on their legacy, to continue on their legacy, to keep their name alive. Some say Ann Wood was a teenager. Some say she was a grown woman in her early, 20s. And some say she was a teenager in her late teens. But however, she was a slave woman that lived on a plantation in Loudon, Virginia. So one day she got fed up and got tired and wanted her freedom and was going to get herself free and get to the north, to get to Philadelphia to get free. And she was going to take as many, teenagers and kids with her as possible. So she plotted this. She set it up for Christmas Eve in 1855. So she got free, stole a wagon. Her and these young teenagers, these young outlaws, you could even say these were Maroons too, you know what I mean? Maroonage, man. They got free. They got a wagon. So on Christmas Eve, they escaped. Some part of Loudon, they got out of Loudon, Virginia, was going up through Virginia trying to make it to Philadelphia. Okay. The patroller, the word got back. And so the slave patrol, the slave police, the pigs, got word of Ann Wood and her people and her little gang getting away. And they started to follow them so they can capture them. So they was hot on their trail. So patrollers, these slave patrollers finally caught up with the group of these teenagers, slaves who escaped by wagon with Ann Wood. But when they ran up on Ann Woods and these teenager outlaws, they were shocked because Ann Woods pulled out a pump, not a pump, but pulled out a shotgun. She pulled out a shotty, and then and the rest of the teenagers hopped out the wagon and pulled out their guns. When they brandished these weapons, they dared the slave patrollers to open fire. So the slave patrollers, for some reason, didn't open fire. And when they didn't open fire, these Ann Woods and them hopped back in the wagon and escaped and made their way to Philadelphia. They made their way up to Philadelphia, where they gained their freedom and got free. Some of them stayed in Philly. Some of them made their way further up north into what we known as today as Boston, Massachusetts. And after this rebellious revolutionary resistant act took place, this is when the Fugitive Slave Law came, where they tried to enforce this law at an all-time high when Ann Woods escaped, so they can reduce the number of slaves escaping from the south to the upper north, to the north, man. Due to Ann Woods, this is what made the fugitive law more prominent and more enforced and put into effect. You see what I'm saying? When Ann Woods escaped with those outlaw teenagers, man. So I just want to give a great solid move, a salute to the revolutionary mama of Virginia, Ann Woods, and to all those teenagers who rolled with her, who pulled out the straps, who pulled out the shotgun on their slave pig patrols who were trying to capture them and put them back into slavery, man. Just salute to y'all, man. You know what I mean? So this has been the video, man, on the Dismal Swamp Maroons and Ann Wood and the fugitive teenage outlaws of Virginia, man. Like I said, man, do your history on your slave. Do your history on your state's slave history, and I will guarantee you, you will find great history in your state, especially if you live in the South. If you live in the South, do research on your state's slave history. You will be surprised how much great history is right there in this history. Right there in your city, in your state, on your ancestors, man. Trust me, this is what I do, man. And when you get the information, share it with us. Share it with new African people. Share it with black people, man. Because it's our story, our history, every day. 365 days a year, man. Keep sharing this information. Do research on your slave history in your state and reveal it to the world, man. Because all this information needs to be put out there, man. So our kids, and future generations will know that our people was just not no people who just sat back and sat on their butts and just took the punishment from Europeans, and who just took their, tyrannical acts and just sit there and just live like, brainwashed, people. You see what I'm saying? We had a great majority of people who resisted, and this information must be put out there, man. So I'm gonna sign off right there. This has been Haki Kweli Shakur, man. Cedar Gabriel Prosser. The Cedar Ann Wood. Shout out to all the revolutionary, man. New African freedom fighters from slavery all the way up until now, man. Let's get free. Free the land. Pamoja Tutashinda. Together we will win. Rebuild. Saleh Mu.